Next sneak peek at Renegade Immortal Episode 86 Plot Breakdown. Wanglin devoured one of the spirit veins in the outer gate of the soul refining sect in order to restore his cultivation, and his cultivation returned to the peak of Yanjing. This act triggered the attention of the inner sect's higher-ups, but he looked calm and collected. He swept a glance at the guarding cultivators beside him, and already had a plan in his mind. If it really came to a critical moment, he could call out his soul beasts to instantly escape. However, he was not willing to give up this excellent cultivation place until it was absolutely necessary. Although the spirit has recovered, it is still not fully collected. After unsuccessfully trying to take out the heavenly reversal beads, he pondered for a moment and decided to stay put. At this time the sky was slightly bright, the early sun was rising, and warmth was sprinkled all over the earth. The sunlight dispelled the darkness and the surroundings gradually brightened. At this time, a middle-aged scribe from the inner sect of the soul refining sect swept in, followed by 9 red-robed cultivators. These red-robed cultivators were of different ages, but they all had one thing in common. They were surrounded by a large number of unjust souls. From afar, under the sunlight, the purple and black aura was as monstrous as a demonic flame. The crowd was divided into 10 groups to be inspected. The middle-aged scribe barked orders in a cold voice, and 9 red-robed cultivators slowly stepped forward. They cast spells at the same time, waving their sleeves as several red lights flew out, forcibly dividing the thousands of peripheral disciples into 10 portions. Each red-robed cultivator was responsible for a group, and in turn, they switched the peripheral disciples around for inspection. They don't need to say much. They just use their right hand to point at the other person's brow, and after a short pause, they change. Wanglin was placed in the 3rd group. He was calm and had no abnormalities. These 9 red-robed cultivators were all at mid-yin-yin cultivation. But in Wanglin's eyes, they were just ants. Whenever a peripheral disciple passed the inspection, he would breathe a huge sigh of relief. As time passed, the atmosphere became more and more oppressive. Right at this moment, there was suddenly a green B-shirt cultivator in the 4th group of teens whose figures sped backwards like a meteor. The inner disciples of the surrounding soul refining sect were fully focused, and when they saw this, someone immediately made a move to stop him. A mid-stage Jadan disciple rushed forward, but was slapped back by the green B-shirt cultivator with a furious shout. The green B-shirt cultivator took the opportunity to rush out, but the red-robe cultivator in charge of the 4th group sneered. His right hand grabbed through the air, and 5 black awns shot out from his fingertips as fast as lightning, catching up with the green B-shirt cultivator and drilling into his body. The green shirt cultivator grunted miserably. His body softened. Was red-robed cultivator yanked back, thrown in the middle of the open space. After doing this, the red-robed cultivator didn't even look at the green B-shirt cultivator, but just faintly said, "Next." The peripheral disciples were all apprehensive, especially those who had their hearts set on blending in. Their faces were ugly to the extreme at the moment. The red-robe cultivator in charge of the 8th group's gaze flickered as he glanced at the pale-faced peripheral disciple under his finger, who was begging for more than just forgiveness, and with a wave of his hand, he threw him out onto the open space. Gradually, there were more and more peripheral disciples on the open ground, already exceeding 30 people. In the past, only those disciples who obtained the qualification to enter the inner sect in the grand competition would be subjected to this kind of search. Today it's the turn of you peripheral disciples. You should feel honored. The red-robed cultivator in charge of the 3rd group threw one of the peripheral disciples under him into the open space and said coldly. Wanglin was calm on the surface, but inwardly he moved slightly. The soul refining sect really isn't simple. There are so many people with ulterior motives among the peripheral disciples, but under the search of this soul streamer, it will be difficult for these people to hide. As for the reckless man in Cave 743, Wanglin had planted a prohibition in his body long ago, so he wasn't afraid of being detected. His cultivation hadn't fully recovered yet, but the subtlety of the prohibition was far beyond the ability of these yin-yang cultivators to see through it. This person seems quite interesting to Wanglin on the surface. He has a late foundation establishment cultivation level, but in reality, he has reached the early stage of Jadin. However, among the outer disciples, there were quite a few people who hid their cultivation, so it wasn't that rare. "You come over," the red-robed cultivator in charge of the fifth group pointed towards the mangy man. The mangy man's body trembled as he hurriedly stepped forward. The red-robed cultivator's right hand pointed at the center of his brow and waved his hand after a slight pause. The reckless man was relieved and walked to the side to stand still, not daring to look at Wanglin. Inwardly, he was both shocked and afraid. Just now, under that old man's point, he only felt a chill in his body, as if there were invisible big hands going over his memories. This feeling came and went quickly, and when he reacted, it was over, and the chill went back down his body to the center of his eyebrows where the other person's fingertip had touched. The time wasn't long. When it was Wanglin's turn, the red-robed cultivator in charge of the third team tapped his brow with his right hand and said after a short pause, "Next." Wanglin looked calm and stepped aside. By noon, thousands of peripheral disciples had been checked one by one, and more than 100 people were eventually thrown in the central open space. Was anything found? The middle-aged scribe threw the last person into the open space and opened his mouth to ask. Aside from these people with ulterior motives, no connection to last night's events has been found. A red-robe cultivator responded coldly. The remaining few also shook their heads. "You peripheral disciples, go to the nearby peaks to cultivate. Someone will arrange it themselves." The middle-aged scribe pondered for a moment and gave the order. The peripheral disciples who passed the inspection respectfully left and flew to the other peaks around. As for the 100 or so people in the open space, no one looked at them again or cared about their end. On a slightly shorter mountain peak, Wanglin was assigned a cave. He was sitting cross-legged in the cave at the moment, his eyes flickering. His cultivation has recovered to the middle stage of yin-yang. Although absorbing spirit veins is effective, it's extremely risky. And if you try it frequently, it's very likely to attract God-realizing cultivators or infant transformation old monsters. Now that it has attracted attention, it can no longer act rashly. However, when he absorbed the spirit vein just now, he realized there was actually a largest main vein present in the surroundings. What he absorbed before was merely a branch of the main vein. The main vein is located precisely at the inner gate of the soul-refining sect. Thinking of this, his eyes flashed. "I think that when I get there, if I have the right opportunity to absorb and exhale, I will definitely be able to recover all of my cultivation in one go. At that time, even if he is detected, or even if there is an infant-changing old monster, he will have his own way to get out. But the big thing is to tear open the space cracks and use the star compass to leave." Wanglin thought for a moment and had a plan in his heart. He knew that this soul-refining sect was a sect of a fifth-level cultivation country, and there must be infant-change stage cultivators sitting within it. When he thought of this, a hint of determination flashed in his eyes. The grand competition in June is the best time to enter the inner sect of the soul-refining sect. Rumor has it that the soul-refining sect has a town treasure, a soul streamer that has condensed more than 100 million souls. And when it's waved this time, heaven and earth will change color, so it can be called the magic treasure that counts in the Vermilion Bird Star. Although most of the Vermilion Bird Star cultivators knew some divine abilities of collecting souls and refining streamers, they were far inferior compared to the soul-refining sect. If we can learn the art of refining streamers with wandering souls, the power will definitely be no less than a forbidden streamer. Wanglin's gaze flickered, and his right hand shook in front of him, and a residual shadow appeared, which then came off to imprison the surrounding area. He then patted his storage bag and took out a piece of immortal jade that flickered with white aura, which was missing a corner. But the immortal power emitted was no different. After recovering his cultivation to the middle stage of Yin Yang, he can swallow a piece of immortal jade again and forcefully impact the T-marks and seals. Wanglin was silent for a few moments, broke off a small piece from the immortal jade, and took a deep breath into his mouth. Immediately, unimaginable sharp pain swept over him. At the same time, in a valley in the land of migration within the Chu Kingdom, a silvery laughter and a tiger's low roar of aggravation came from the valley. The valley was full of spring and green grass. Little Jo-Ru, dressed in a flowery coat embroidered with peonies, red pants, and 2 pigtails on her head, was sitting on a tiger full of black stripes and laughed. "Little White, you don't listen to me. I'm punishing you for eating with chopsticks tonight." That tiger growled with sadness in his voice. For more than a year, he had been tortured by this little devil all day long, even sleeping at night. He was often woken up by nightmares, with that little devil's figure in his dreams every time. "You're too loud. You need to keep it down in the future." Jo-Ru suddenly clapped her hands and laughed. "By the way, Xiao Bai, can you learn to bark like a kitten?" The tiger's roar became even more desolate. Jo-Ru sighed and patted the tiger's head lightly with her small hand. "I don't know how Uncle is doing. He's not back yet. Little White, do you want to miss Uncle?" The tiger roared lightly, listlessly, sort of responding. At the moment he was full of thoughts about how a tiger of his own could make catcalls. Tai Yan Saturday on his knees under the pagoda, his eyes looked at Xiao Jo-Ru with kindness. After a long time, he sighed softly. The news of Wanglin's disappearance had long been spread to Chu, but he chose to conceal it and did not tell Jo-Ru. He always believed that with Ngong's cultivation, he would be able to turn danger into safety. Ngong had said that he would definitely return in 9 years. Then he would definitely do it. A look of determination appeared in Tian's eyes. 100 feet away from Tian, Thunder Frog lazily sprawled there sunbathing, his huge eyes half squinted, looking extremely enjoyable. He almost didn't move for a year, always sprawled there looking at the white clouds in the sky. Thunder Frog would occasionally miss the life in the land of ancient gods. Since his birth, he had survived there and gradually grew up. In the land of the ancient gods, there were battles almost every day, with all kinds of demonic beasts competing for food and territory, often erupting into vicious battles. During these long years of fierce battles, Thunder Frog grew up, and he slowly mastered the skill of spitting out thunderballs. Since then, in the land of ancient gods, except for a few demonic beasts, he was almost unhindered. At this moment, recalling the past, the Thunder Frog's abdomen bulged and then slowly contracted. A moment later, he thought of time flies. Instantly spring has passed. Into the month of June. June for other people may be ordinary, but for the Vishnu country soul refining sect's peripheral disciples, but it is a crucial day. This month is the time of soul refining sect's peripheral disciples' big competition. Tens of thousands of peripheral disciples went through layers of elimination, and only one could become an inner disciple. On this day, Wanglin awoke from his seclusion. He slowly opened his eyes, and at first glance his eyes were black and white. But a closer look revealed that there were stars shining in his eyes that were unusually bright. The T-marks on his face were even dimmer, with only 8 pieces left, which were interlaced to form the key structure of Sun Tai's seal. The small piece of immortal jade that he had swallowed had been completely absorbed by him, and the seal began to shrink drastically under the impact, but it was never possible to get rid of it completely. Late Yanqing stage Great Circle, Wanglin whispered to himself and slowly got up. Taking a deep breath, he walked out of the cave. What I'm sensing is the meaning of life and death in the reincarnation heavenly Tao. The more I penetrate life and death in the world, the harder it is to get rid of it. In the past, I always thought that life was life and death was death, However, as my enlightenment deepened, I realized that sometimes life is death and death is life. I, Wanglin, have been killing all my life, and have seen almost all death, with only a few sensations of life. Limuan's heartbeat counts as one, and my state of mind this time counts as one as well. It's just not enough. Wanglin walked out of the cave and looked at the mountains in the distance, gently shaking his head. This time, after the robbery, my state of mind has changed a little bit compared to the past. Especially the months in the Firecloud Cottage were a deeper realization. Seeing life as life, seeing death as death, seeing life as not life, seeing death as not death, these two senses correspond to the original intent of transforming into a god respectively. Wanglin stood outside the cave. The mountain wind blew and his clothes hunted. This chance has made me vaguely realize something. If I can find that point of conversion and return to the realm of seeing life as life and death as death, again, I can make a breakthrough in intent and reach the late stage of transformation god. However, although the realm of life and death, intent at the late stage of god transformation, can be successfully perceived, the ultimate consummation is still difficult. The consummation of the late transformation god stage requires the same extreme in the realm of intent. It's just that this kind of consummation is very different from that of an infant transformation stage cultivator's intention. That Li Yuanfeng is already at the early infant transformation stage. His intention was even able to form an entity and leave T-marks on my body. This kind of power is obviously not comparable to the god transformation intention. So it seems, the perfect of the spirit transformation stage realm can only be regarded as a certain level. Above that, the infant transformation stage still requires a deeper, higher level of realization. Wanglin's gaze was deep in thought. At this moment, he didn't realize that at the mouth of a cave in the distance, a stunningly beautiful woman was silently watching him. The woman's gaze was complicated, seeming confused, doubtful, and helpless. Back then, when I was in the Immortal world, Senior Joey gifted me a scripture of the inquiring tripod, with which the certainty of reaching the inquiring tripod stage would be much greater. I think that this inquiry tripod is the collection of the cultivator's intention in this life. I do not know what year and month. Wanglin will have the opportunity to ask the tripod. I don't know how long it will take for me to have a chance to ask for the tripod. Right now, the seal hasn't been removed, and the infant transformation is still hopeless. Wanglin sighed softly. Heavenly Fortune has accepted me as his disciple, so maybe I should go to him as soon as possible. And maybe I'll have a chance to reach the tripod stage. But if you leave with your current cultivation level, Situ Nan has not yet awakened. Elevated to the ultimate realm, the path of immortal cultivation has not yet been reached. Some unwillingness, more importantly, the cultivation level of the cultivators on that heavenly fortune star is generally high, so if they don't have enough strength to go there, they won't be valued by the heavenly fortune sun. Wanglin suddenly became aware of something and looked sideways, immediately seeing the gaze of the woman in the distance. Who exactly is this woman? Wanglin's gaze flickered and his body leaped, floating toward the cave where the woman was. The woman withdrew her gaze and took a few steps back to make room. Wanglin landed where the woman stood before and swept his gaze coldly at the woman, not moved in the slightest by her stunning beauty, and said in a deep voice, "Do you recognize me?" The woman looked at Wanglin and said in a soft voice, "You don't remember me?" Wanglin's gaze flickered, and he stared at the woman carefully for a long time, but he couldn't recall where he had seen this woman. The mountain wind blew, blowing the woman's green silk at her temples, fluttering like a fairy out of the mortal world. Her jade hand held the green silk behind her ear, looked up at Wanglin, and softly said, "My name is Willow Eyebrows." Wanglin looked at the woman, and after a few moments slowly said, "I don't know." Willow Eyebrows sighed lightly and smiled slightly. This smile was like a blossoming flower that blossomed in a flash, stunningly blossoming in anger. Covering all the surrounding scenery, senior brother Wanglin, back then, that teenager from the Hengia sect who carried a huge sword. Have you really forgotten? This woman broke his identity with a single word, but Wanglin had no ripples. As early as when the other party called herself Willow Eyebrows, he had already guessed. The Liu Mei No is a woman born with a water spirit root in the Xuandao Sect, not a disciple of the Vermilion Bird Kingdom. Wanglin's tone was flat. Willow Eyebrows' Francis and his expression was rare and grave. He scrutinized Wanglin carefully and asked softly, "What does senior brother Wang mean by that?" Wanglin didn't respond and just looked at him calmly. A moment later, Liu Mei lowered his head, and his voice was weak. "Senior brother Wang is afraid that there is a misunderstanding. For someone who can appear in the Xuandao sect and then enter the soul refining sect, besides the Vermilion Bird Country, I can't think of any other cultivation country that has such an ability." Wanglin interrupted him and turned to leave. Willow Eyebrows smiled slightly and said, "Just based on that alone, you think I'm a disciple of the Vermilion Bird Kingdom? Is senior brother Wang really so sure? Perhaps you're testing me as well." He paused and continued, "Senior brother Wang, I won't hide anything from you. Am indeed from the Vermilion Bird Kingdom." Wanglin didn't turn around. A hint of mockery flashed in his eyes as he slowly said, "Is it a test? I've seen your bracelet on Red Butterfly." As the words fell, his figure swayed gently and floated away. Liu Mei looked down at the bracelet on her wrist. Just now the mountain wind had whipped by and her sleeves were raised, revealing the bracelet. She looked at Wanglin's distant back, sighed quietly, and muttered, "I haven't seen him in 500 years. He's changed too much. The once clueless teenager is no longer there, and now his inner heart is as hard as iron. But what exactly is his Dao heart? I'm afraid only he knows." Liu Mei's appearance caused a layer of haze to cover Wanglin's heart. The Vermilion Bird Kingdom was like a huge monster enveloping the entire Vermilion Bird Star, and no matter where they were, anyone could feel the oppression from him, and the higher their cultivation level was, the stronger this feeling became. Even though the vision of the Vermilion Bird Kingdom was short-lived, that invisible sense of crisis was deeply imprinted in Wanglin's heart, whether it was the cultivation mansion full of mutes or the battle with Red Butterfly. He was always wrapped up in a kind of pressure that made him breathless. This feeling was like a black curtain that covered the sky, and without the power to tear him apart, he couldn't get rid of the shadow of the Vermilion Bird Kingdom. Although the overlord of the Vermilion Bird Star seems powerful in Wanglin's eyes, the entirety of the Vermilion Bird Kingdom is shrouded in a deathly aura, which isn't the ordinary meaning of life and death, but rather, it's a sense of losing vitality and stagnation. I'm afraid that the Vermilion Bird Kingdom has come to the end of the road. Wanglin raised his eyes and looked into the distance, where the Vermilion Bird Kingdom was located. 2 days later, the Soul Refining Sect's grand competition kicked off. Tens of thousands of peripheral disciples were distributed in hundreds of battlegrounds, and they fought several times a day. Among these peripheral disciples were scattered cultivators and people from cultivation clans who had come to the Soul Refining Sect for this day. The Soul Refining Sect had only one rule for the outer disciple competition: as long as you can win, the loser lives or dies. The loser lives or dies. The victor can kill if he wants to. As long as one had the ability, no one would interfere even if they slaughtered everyone. There was even a rumor circulating among the peripheral disciples that the more people a participant killed, the greater the chance of being selected in the end. If someone killed and survived all the way, then his certainty of entering the inner sect would be incredibly high. This rumor would spread every time there was a great competition. In fact, many years ago, there was indeed a killing star who killed his way to the final duel and was still admitted to the inner sect despite his defeat. The rumor spread rapidly due to that courageous income. After each competition, Less than half of the tens of thousands of outer disciples survived, and without exception, after the competition, the survivors had to pay more resources in order to keep their status as outer disciples, and to fight for the chance to enter the inner sect in the next competition. For countless years, no one knows how many peripheral disciples have died in the great competition. After each grand competition, the number of souls on the soul refining sect's authentic soul streamers had increased by how much, and the entire soul refining sect continued to grow through this brutal method. Every day, a large number of peripheral disciples died, and the hundreds of battlefields were almost bloodied. Wanglin had been observing for the past few days. For every death, their souls would be absorbed by the battlefield platform and disappear. This day it was Wanglin's turn to take the field. He suddenly got up and landed on the left side of the platform. A black-robed Jadan cultivator, who was the inner disciple presiding over the battlefield, coldly swept a glance at Wanglin and was shaken inwardly. In his opinion, this person's cultivation was even on par with his own. It was not common for such a strong person to appear among the outer disciples. He whispered under his breath, "No 8,972 meets the battle." A low shout came out from the surrounding disciples, followed by a short and fat figure leaping out, just like a huge meatball landing on the platform with a bang. He did not say a word, appeared immediately after the hand's pinch knots. A ball of fire instantly appeared in front of the body, such as fire rain pouring down. Under his finger straight to Wanglin smashed. Late Foundation establishment, Wanglin shook his head. In order to enter the inner door, he suppressed his cultivation in the middle Jadan stage. At this moment, with a wave of his right hand, his body has jumped off the platform at the moment he left. The short and fat cultivator's body trembled, the fireball suddenly disappeared, and his head tilted as he felt. As time passed, a large number of peripheral disciples died tragically. After 7 days, only 100 of the tens of thousands of disciples were left to enter the next round. The remaining 50% were dead, and the rest survived due to giving up early or losing both. In these 7 days, there are 4 people who have attracted the attention of the soul refining sect. One of them is a gray-haired old man with late Jadan cultivation, and all the people he encountered along the way were killed by the same spell, which is like some kind of marvelous magical power. Just a little bit of space, and spit out the word death, and the other party was immediately killed. Wanglin saw the moment of this art. The brain immediately associated with the extreme realm was stunned, but after careful observation and found that this magical ability and the extreme realm is similar but very different. Death spell technique. Wanglin guessed the name of this spell after a moment of contemplation. Back then, when he was in the sea of demon cultivation, his extreme realm had been mistaken for this technique, and it was only then that he learned something about the death mantra technique. This death spell technique was extremely difficult to cultivate, and it was the first time Wanglin had witnessed someone casting it after 500 years of cultivation. The other person was a short, thin teenager. This young man's cultivation is only at the early stage of Jadan, but he has a kind of intuition like a wild beast, able to sense the fluctuation of spiritual energy before the execution of any spell and make a response in advance. Facing high-level cultivators might not be useful, but in the same level, this ability can be said to be unbeatable. Even when Wanglin saw this young man, he couldn't help but feel a hint of love for his talent, and even moved to accept the idea of a disciple, but ultimately gave up. The third person Wanglin was quite familiar with was the reckless man from Cave 743. This person held a magic treasure, which was a piece of talisman paper, and when he used it, he killed countless people along the way, and no one who fought against him was spared. As for the last person, it was Wanglin himself. He was so light on his feet that all the disciples he encountered were rendered unconscious with a wave of his hand. Such a performance naturally attracted the attention of the crowd, And this is precisely what Wanglin deliberately did, only striking, and ultimately obtained the qualification to enter the inner door will not appear to be abrupt. As for Willow Eyebrows, Wanglin was sure that he would approach him for a purpose, and even if he didn't show up in the grand competition, there must be other ways to enter the inner gate. Time flew by, and another 7 days passed. The 100 selected disciples once again experienced brutal elimination, and in the end only 4 people remained. Coincidentally, the remaining 4 people were the 4 people who were the subject of the soul-refining sect's attention. This day it was Wanglin's turn to make an appearance. He stood on the platform and looked at the cultivator who walked up to the stage. The corner of his mouth revealed a meaningful smile. The person who went up to the stage was no one else but the reckless man from that 743 cave. The one presiding over this competition was an early Yenjin cultivator from the soul-refining sect. This person was already in middle age, his temples slightly white, his eyes swept over, and said in a cold voice, "Start." As soon as his words fell, the mangy man immediately smiled bitterly and inwardly sighed. Old me still has that kid's forbidden power in my body right now. I must admit defeat. He hurriedly said, "I admit defeat." The Dwaning cultivator was stunned, glanced at Manghan and asked, "You admit defeat?" Manghan quickly nodded his head. "I admit defeat," saying that, he quickly stepped off the platform, his heart beating faster. Otherwise the other party's mind will be able